I'm Dylan Playfair.
And I'm Tyler Smith.
And this
is Bromance.
Nailed it.
Our guest today is one of Canada's most recognizable, trusted, and hilarious voices in sports media. You know him from hosting TSN SportsCentre for almost 20 years, his stellar Olympic coverage, his cameos in Letterkenny and Shoresy, and his ridiculously funny and honest best-selling books.
Joe was one of the nicest guys you'll ever meet. I can attest to it firsthand. To be on the highlights and the jokes, he's someone who's seen firsthand what male friendships in sports look like. He's lived the trust, the loyalty, and the sense of humor that shape people's careers and their lives. See one and only Jay Onrait.
Hey guys, thanks for having me. This is awesome. Excited to see you guys.
Likewise, brother.
How are you, man?
Man, I'm pretty good. You know, I'm grateful to be here with you guys, talking about stuff like this. Grateful to still be doing something I love to do. You know, I'm lucky in that way that a lot of the people I started in this business with aren't working in this business anymore. So I'm very grateful to just still be doing what I'm doing. This is what I always wanted to do my whole life, and still doing it, and really enjoying it. You know, like appreciating work every day and trying to be grateful and present and all that bullshit. So yeah.
Jay, you talked about wanting to do this your whole life. Can you take us back to the start? You know, what was the seed that planted this in your mind? You know, the inspiration to pursue something like this.
Well, for me, like I grew up small town Alberta. The concept of being on television was such a dream that seemed too big to ever achieve. So I didn't. I chickened out of high school. I always wanted to do it, but I just thought there's just no way. So I chickened out and I went into pharmacy. My parents had a pharmacy. So I was like, I'm just going to take the easy way out. And after a couple of years of that, it's funny because I've been talking to a lot of kids about this, you know, how everyone has to make a decision about what they want to do with their lives at age 18. And it seems so insane to me, right? Like when I was 18, I was so dumb. So just the concept of deciding what I want to do with my whole life at that point is so insane. But I did manage to get the balls to just sort of stop that career path of pharmacy and say, you got to do what you really want to do. You only go around once in life. So I got the guts to apply to Ryerson in Toronto and got in, and it kind of took off from there. But the person who first inspired me was probably Chris Berman. You know, it's a token answer kind of, but I remember growing up, we got NFL primetime on TSN right before the Sunday nighter on Sundays. And to say that he was an influence on not just me, but just a whole generation of sportscasters would be understating it. He was so unique at the time in that he was dressed like an everyman. Like Chris Berman dressed like Tony Soprano going to a funeral, basically, like, you know, the Sears ties, just nothing fancy. Like he was a real like working class guy, and then a funny guy. You know, he added all the nicknames and everything. People had just never done that before Chris did it, and he made doing highlights seem like performance art. You know, he made it seem like something that was beyond just saying who the players were and what the scores were. He really added something to it with his personality, and that really inspired me to kind of do the same thing down the road. But he was definitely the first one who made me think like, oh, this seems like this would be a fun thing to do with your life.
Like when I got into the TV sportscasting after school too, like it's definitely, you got to pay your dues. Like you got to get out there, and whether it is Athabasca or whether like wherever you end up, like you got to just pay your dues. And I think one thing that I've always noticed about you is like you're able to like be that person in a room where I think people feel like comfortable and like, so was that even back then when you're in Saskatoon, when you're in Winnipeg, when you're in Ryerson, like when you're bouncing around trying to find your footing, like how did you find your footing? I mean, growing up in Alberta, in Athabasca, Alberta, rural Alberta, I think it helps a little bit, but also then you're going to bigger cities, you're going to bigger spots, and it's a bit intimidating. So how did you find your footing?
The biggest thing for me is that it was timing. And I always say this to people, and, you know, Dylan, acting is the same thing, right? Like a lot of it is timing, a lot of it is luck. You're at the right audition at the right time. You're just what they're looking for. 10 other guys might be as good an actor as you, but you just have that look they're looking for. I was lucky. The fact that I grew up on the prairies after going to Ryerson and loving Toronto, my first job was in Saskatoon. I was ecstatic about that. For a kid growing up in Toronto, they'd be like, I don't know where Saskatoon is. I don't know anything about it. For me, I was like, I know that city. It's an awesome city. I'm like, I'm ready to go. Like I was elated to move to Saskatoon. I had a lot of buddies starting out of the business who started in way smaller towns like Yorkton and PA and Lloydminster and places like that. So
Oh
Saskatoon
yeah.
was like the Paris of the prairies for me. So I was grateful to be there. And then going to Winnipeg, I loved the city. I just thought it was super artsy and a real cool like arts culture, bands coming from there, the ballet, the symphony. Like it's very artsy city and very cool city. To me, I always try to embrace the cool things about places like that and the cool things about people who live there. I hate when people paint a brush over everybody who lives in certain spots. And I think they'd be shocked to find how many interesting people live in smaller towns like that. To me, I focus on that kind of thing. And as far as trying to make people feel comfortable, I just know how intimidating it was for me to come from that small town and go to the big city and then go into Ryerson and then get an internship at TSN. And I always tell people, Michael Landsberg, who used to host Off the Record, when I was in first year Ryerson, we had to do a project where we had to go interview someone we admired in the industry. And this is pre-internet, so like I'm that old, right? So so you couldn't just email somebody or text somebody, like you actually had to call them and leave a message. So I called Landsberg at work, like they actually put me through his work number, and I left a message on his phone, squeaky voice, prairie accent, it's, hey, I'd love to come in and talk to you or whatever. Anyway, he called me back the next day. I couldn't believe it. He called me back in my dorm room at Ryerson the next day. He's like, I can meet you for coffee. But he said, why don't you come into the network? You can
Yeah.
watch me for the day and you can kind of interview me throughout the day, but that way you'll kind of see what I do. And I'm just like, oh my God, that's incredible. So I did it. And that was sort of my in. After that, there was an internship at TSN. Michael helped me with that. So I always think about that, when people ask me, about jobs and how to get in the industry. I just think about how he helped me in that situation. We had no reason to. I was just nobody. He had no reason to help me. I was just a kid from Ryerson. So that really stuck with me, that he stuck his neck out for me like that. And
I'd love to get that voicemail.
yeah, I know. And just in the Landsberg voice too, like you're just, and then again, that's back when we had the answering machines, so I get back to my room after class and it hit play and it's like, it's like Landsberg just booming out of the answering machine. It was just so, it was an amazing moment, a seminal moment in my early life for sure.
That's awesome. That seems to be another common theme of people, seeing the almost themselves in folks that want to do what they're doing, and there's a passion about what they do, and when you can see it in someone else, it makes it. I think it adds another layer to sort of reaching out and helping when you see a bit of yourself in someone coming up who wants to do what you're passionate about, right? And I think to do the job that you have, you've got to really, really love it because it's all encompassing. It's a grind, but if you see someone who loves it the way you love it, it makes it a bit easier to take that time to go, okay, here's a path that might work for you, and each one teach one, right?
I totally agree. And it's an interesting job in the sense that, like you alluded to, Tyler, like you have to go to the small town first, get that experience. And I always said that to people and, who said they were interested in being on air. Right away, I would lose like 80% of the people because, if you grew up in, say, Vancouver or Toronto or something, the concept of moving to Medicine Hat is pretty intimidating, like it just is, because you don't know where that is and you don't have any friends and you don't know anyone, right? It's intimidating thing to do. And the ones who did it are the ones who are still working today because it's that first job is the hardest one by far. And it's the most remote, you get paid the least. It's all these sacrifices that if you make them at a young age, it's so much easier, right? You don't need as much. And so I always said that to people, as soon as you can get out, just do it, just make that leap. The next ones will kind of fall into place a lot easier after that.
And what did mom and dad think? Like obviously, I think they probably had somewhat of an idea that you don't want to be a pharmacist. Going from small town Alberta to now you're in the big city and like now you're doing it. Like what does mom and dad say?
They love it. And they were never like the kind of, they were classic baby boomers. They didn't want me to do something I didn't want to do. My dad was a pharmacist, but he always said it's counting pills. He never loved, he never loved the job. He loved owning a business and he loved being a business person and having his own store. But the actual job itself, he'd always say, it's counting pills, man. It's counting pills. And so he never made it seem super appealing from that perspective, if that makes any sense. And it would have been a great gig and a great job and everything. But I think, it's a testament to that sort of, it's corny and it's cliche, but you really do only get one chance and you might as well take a shot at it. And I suppose if it hadn't worked out, I suppose I could have come back with my tail between my legs and
Count some pills.
yeah, count some pills. If I was lucky, at that point, I probably would have just been stocking Pampers on the shelves like I did all through high school. But yeah, it's funny like how it worked out. But a lot of it, like I was saying to you guys earlier, was timing. In the fall of '98, that's when Sportsnet launched. And I just happened to be graduating that year. So all these guys on the prairies, Roger Millions, Peter Labardius, Darren Drager, Darren Millard, all these guys who've been working on the prairies for a long time, happily, they pretty much figured we're going to be working in Edmonton and Calgary our lives. Suddenly Sportsnet was calling them and being like, we need guys, like, come on out. So they were leaving. And all of a sudden there was these jobs in these towns of the prairies that I knew, that I'd played hockey in, that I'd been to lots. And I was like, I'd happily take a job in any of those towns. So it was really a lot of time. Those of us who graduated late '90s, early 2000s were really lucky because the business was really booming at that point. And there were jobs out there.
St. Joel, you mentioned Tommy. Something very similar happened with a show that we both worked on, Letterkenny, where the YouTube series hit, and Crave was being launched by Bell. It was their first streaming platform, and we were the first show, the first Crave original, and it just happened to be the timing of our YouTube series was picking up steam, and they were looking for content. And I mean, it's funny because we would have been happy doing this thing on YouTube. It was friends hanging out, making stuff that we thought was funny. And the universe seems to find a way when you're doing something that you love. It's like those doors start to open up and that path becomes a little bit more clear when you're right in the thick of it.
And I think the big thing that resonated with your show early on was how authentic it was, right? And those of us who, when you watched it for the first time, especially those of us who grew up in small towns, man, that show resonated with me early on. The way Jared's writing captured every little aspect of the cliques that happen in every small town was so just chef's kiss perfect, in my opinion. And the way you guys executed it and still continue to execute it, it was just so impressive to me over the course of the run. I was so grateful to even have a little small part of it, but it's authentic. It's everything that hits in Canada. It's kind of authenticity. We don't have the budgets. We don't have the budgets, right? We don't have really the money to compete with the stuff in the States. But why does Letterkenny hit? Why does Shoresy hit? Why does Heated Rivalry hit? It's not because of the budget, obviously, right? We know that. It's the authentic nature of the art. It's the fact that it speaks to something that we can really relate to. Even something as simple as Corner Gas, right, Tyler? Like,
Oh yeah.
it's like people I think watch that show and think, well, it's simple, or maybe it's corny, but it's super authentic because Brent lived there, right? He grew up in Tisdale. He lived that life. And that came from the heart. That came, the art came from him. It was an experience he lived. So, had someone come from LA and be like, hey, I got a great idea. I'll work at a gas station in Saskatchewan. It would just never have been the same because it just came from somewhere authentic. And I think that's why your stuff with Jared has hit so much, Dylan. And I think that's why Brent was successful. Trailer Park Boys, you can go back on and on and on. That stuff is just all super authentic stuff.
Yeah, I think the camera is almost a bullshit detector, and there was a turning point for me in my career where I was a big fan of Friday Night Lights and Taylor Kitsch, a Canadian boy. He'd gone through the BCHL and then made a career as an actor, and I wanted to be him. I wanted to be the next Taylor Kitsch, and it wasn't until I realized, well, I had to be the first Dylan Playfair. I had to be authentically me. If I'm trying to be someone other than myself, that's going to read on camera. And I think that's, very clear in your on-screen presence is there's no other Jay Onrait. There's an energy that you have and that authenticity comes through. And if you're trying to be anything other than yourself, it's really hard to do, especially when that camera's, punched in on your face. I feel like people can tell.
Oh yeah, and sportscasting especially, like the thing Dan and I used to drive us nuts was you'd meet a guy who's a sportscaster and he would speak to you like the way we're speaking now, and then he'd get on TV and now I'm a sportscaster. We're like, ugh, like
It's like,
just
what are we
was
doing?
insane. Like
It's really character up, yeah.
yeah, it's like a character. I'm like playing a role. I'm Ron Burgundy now or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, okay. Like the bit and a lot of me kind of letting my personality out, and I always tell people this, was kind of out of desperation. I was super boring when I started. I was just terrified.
Oh.
I was just like,
Yeah.
I got to get through this. I was not like, you guys saw some of my Saskatoon broadcasts. You'd be like, this is the most boring thing I've ever seen. I was just trying to make it from A to B at that point. But when I got to TSN and I started to work with Jennifer Hedger, I just right away was like, I'm sitting next to probably the best looking woman who's ever existed in sports television in this country. And I am just going to be the ugly, gangly guy sitting next to this hot chick if I don't let a little my personality out and show people who I really am. If I remain boring, if I just kind of go from A to B, I will never stand out in this business, especially sitting next to her, who is, she's not only beautiful, but she's really talented. That was really when I was like, okay, I got to let a little bit of this out. And then going back to timing, our boss at the time, there's lots of bosses we might have had who could have said, guys, enough with the goofy shit. They're just here to watch sports. But we had a boss who didn't kind of just like give us the keys. He was way better than that. He said, I do want you to let your personality out, but I'm gonna pull you back. You almost like a coach, almost like your dad feeling like it's just like I know you want to go full on with this, but there's a balance to it, right? Like you can't be 100% jokes. He used to say this isn't the Ha Ha Hut, which was some fictional
Yeah.
comedy shop that he
Comedy club.
yeah, exactly. Call us like the occasional morning, be like, it's too much like the Ha Ha Hut today. We got to dial it back 10%. And we would, and he was right. Like there was that perfect, and that was because we really believed, like at the end of the day, we wanted you to watch the show. And I still want people to watch the show and feel like, oh, now I know what happened in sports. Even if it's a lot of goofiness and a lot of fun and it's entertainment, I still want you to feel like you knew what happened that day. And Dan always felt the same way too. So it was like finding that balance, but again, having someone who believed in us above us to let us do that and give us the space to figure that out. That was, absolutely key to our success. If we didn't have that, I wouldn't be here talking to you guys for sure.
This show's called Bromance, and I know that the industry is a cutthroat industry. Let's be honest, like it's tough. It's I've heard, I'm sure you've heard way more horror stories, but I've heard a lot of, like it's a tough world, and I respect the fact, your longevity, and also the fact that people just love watching you, and I think that has to come from some support throughout the years. And I wonder, the early days when you get into TSN, you get into the big network, like who did you, I mean, you got your Landsbergs and, your Hedgers, but like, did you have a little core group that, from Ryerson, or like people that you kind of came up with that were able to like have your little group and have your little bromances?
It's such a great question because I think the whole Canadian TV industry is one big bromance, TV sports industry.
Yeah.
Because, people are always like, do you like the Sportsnet guys? I'm like, not only do I like the Sportsnet guys, when I moved back from Winnipeg, I was hosting breakfast television in Winnipeg. In 2001, I came back to TSN. And at the time, CTV had just bought TSN, but they still owned Sportsnet. So at the TSN campus, it was Sportsnet and TSN in the same building. So like I'd go to the Niner Diner for lunch and like Hazel May would be there and we'd sit down and hang out, or like it was just hilarious. Like these two competing networks for 2 years were in the same building. But it made me laugh because everybody knew each other. Everybody had probably worked with each other on a previous thing at a previous network. So there's really no room in sports TV in Canada for sort of petty rivalries or jealousy or anything like that. Because at some point you're probably going to end up, it's a small industry. Like so small it would blow your guys' minds. The people behind, not just in front of the camera, but behind the scenes. So I'm comfortable saying almost everyone working at Sportsnet now I've worked with in some capacity, and they're all terrific people. And at the end of the day, there's not that many jobs out there. There's less than ever. So, to have some sort of beef or hang up about someone, you're just limiting yourself even more. And so if you stay open and sort of try to get along with everybody that you possibly can, there's no doubt like the longevity will be there for you. And so in terms of bromance, is like, like I said, it started with Landsberg. Dave Randorf was another one who was super supportive, and then Rod Smith, like all these guys that these household names. I really mean it. Like people sometimes say, oh, is there anyone at TSN you don't get along with? And I'm like, actually, no. Like they're all really great people. There's not a single bad apple in the bunch. I wish Duthie would work more, sure. Like I wish he wouldn't take 6 months off, but that's just my own petty jealousy, right? So, and it goes both ways too. I remember when, James has called me when he's gotten certain offers and stuff, and I've called him, and there's no one who can kind of relate to it, in a way other than we can. Nobody knows what we're making, nobody knows what we're going through other than us. So, yeah, you have to absolutely maintain that stuff. I think so anyway. I definitely helped me over the years. There's no question about it. But again, luck is involved too. The way we ended up in LA was that a Wall Street Journal reporter was stationed in Kitchener-Waterloo in the early 2010s, late 2009s, because BlackBerry was imploding. And so the Wall Street Journal was doing so many articles about BlackBerry imploding that they were like, okay, we got to move someone up there. We'll just move you up there. So it was a dude from Chicago. They moved him to Toronto for like 2 years. And he's a huge sports fan, so he watched us. And he loved us. And so he wrote an article about us in the Wall Street Journal that said, why can't we have Canada's SportsCentre? And it was like a picture of Dan and I on the Craft Celebration Tour in a farmer's field with cowboy hats on. And the president of Fox Sports, Eric Shanks, happened to be reading the Wall Street Journal that day, read the article, and was like, go get those guys. And that's how we ended up down there. It's like so random, you can't even, right? That sounds like a script or something. But that's really how things work in this business. And we set ourselves up for success. We were doing a show that everyone liked, and he obviously liked it. But you still have to have that random thing happen, right? Where the dots are connected. And it's so amazing to me to think that that's how this business is in a lot of ways. It's just, there's so much luck involved. And so, as far as bromances are concerned, you got to try to get along with everyone you can, because you just want to increase your chances of having something crazy like that Wall Street Journal thing happening,
For sure. Yeah, the industry is way too small, I think, for anyone to burn a bridge, and especially Canada.
Yeah.
My wife and I binged Heater Rivalry last night, and we're watching the credits scroll through. And I'm like, I know them, I know them, I know them. It's like pretty unbelievable just how small that world gets, and I can imagine obviously in sportscasting it's even smaller. So that's cool to hear.
It's amazing. Just that small time I spent like on your set, Dylan, because I'd be up for like a morning, basically, shoot my 2 scenes and head back to town kind of thing. But just the camaraderie you guys had on that set was so awesome to see. It felt literally like I was back at Ryerson and we were going out guerrilla style into the streets of Toronto and shooting fun little videos. It had that feel. Like it felt like, I wish every time I left, I was like, I wish I could just stay up here for like 30 days and hang out with these guys and probably get in the way and probably annoy everyone. But
We call it summer camp, right? And if that vibe is felt by everyone on set, it comes through in the finished product, right? When you're making a comedy, it's important to go to work with that energy of we're here to have fun, and again, to bring it back around to what you do, it's easy to see that you're having fun, which I think is so important.
well, the other thing I'll say to you guys is when we got to LA, we did our first show. I came home with my wife and I said, I would actually not watch the show I'm hosting.
It's
was like-
different, right?
I
It's
just
different
knew
there.
it
That was my
like-
next question.
The vibes were off, I like the vibes are just not right. And I just knew it, like I'd been in the business long enough. I'm like,
Wow.
this show is not right. There's something not right about it. It doesn't make any sense. Dan and I are in one corner. There's a whole panel. It's like off the record and SportsCentre together. It's 3 hours
Yeah.
long. If anyone tuned in, they'd be like, what the hell is this? But my point, going back to what you were saying, Dylan, about going into work and feeling that, like when people can just feel it, even if they're not regulars on the show.
Mhm.
The funny thing is, everyone was still so nice there and so friendly. We'd go into work every day. We'd be like, I don't really care. Look, it's so nice. It's so fun. I'm having a good time. I'm driving to work in LA. The show's not good. I don't care. I'm having a great time. Sometimes you just have to say it, I think, and just sort of roll with it. And I'm lucky that hasn't affected me adversely in my career. But I do find that is like sometimes the big picture might seem a little muddy, but the day-to-day can be really an absolute blast regardless of that.
It's crazy to think that you did that for for a Canadian. Like, I know, a lot of Canadians were like, what the heck just happened? Like, we just lost our two people. Like, do you reflect a lot? Like, are you getting to a point where or you kind of still just like be present, be grateful. Let's do this.
Oh, even when we did it, the funny thing about it is I feel zero regrets about going, feel zero
Yeah.
regrets about what happened, zero regrets about coming back. There was no point where it was like, I can't believe we've done this. It was all positive. We got paid well, we got treated well, we came back, we got paid better. Like there's nobody should feel bad for us.
Yeah.
Nobody should feel sorry for us. We got to scratch the itch of trying something in the States, which I think deep down all Canadian sportscasters kind of have that little thing that they want to at least give it a shot. And we
Yeah.
did, and we went down and we realized that we up here do it just as good, if not better than they do on a way smaller budget. I don't think about the States at all. Now I'm just like, I did that. That was great, but I'm super grateful to be back here. And this may sound like a little thing, but just the ability to cover sports I actually like is huge, like I was doing a lot of,
Yeah.
and I like college football and I like all that, but it was a lot, right? So suddenly Saturdays, we'd be working Saturdays and it's just all college football in the highlights. And we'd be like, can we sneak in a little bit of NHL? And they'd be like, that's not what we do down here, So it was like, oh, okay, yeah, I get it. I still love sports and everything, but I really miss hockey, So I think that was a big part of it too. It was like deep down, like we're Canadians. These are the sports we love. These are the sports we love to cover, and we're probably much better suited to be working in Canada.
Ty, do you know what your love language is?
I'm personally a quality time kind of guy myself. You?
Well, see, personally, I'm a gift-giving kind of guy. So I got you this.
A present right from your wrist? You didn't have to. Seriously, I just told you, I'm a quality time kind of person. Hence why we host this very podcast on friendships.
Yeah, you don't think I heard you?
A citizen watch? Dylan, this is too much. You didn't have to.
Aw, sure I didn't. Actually, I do. I need that back though because, you said you love quality time, and I'm a gift giver, but I do promise I will get you a quality timepiece from our friends at Charm Diamond Centers, just not this one, because this one's mine.
Not at all what I meant, but this is really nice. Thanks, DP.
Anytime. I love buying my buddies gifts from Charm Diamonds because they have something for everyone, and they're Canadian owned and operated. So next time you have someone special to shop for, go to charmdiamonds.com.
Charm Diamonds is the proud sponsor of Bromance, where we love taking the time to help combat loneliness.
I really do love these though. They have no batteries. They just run on light. Yeah, they're pretty nifty. Yeah, I'm gonna get you one. Just like I said.
I'll be ready.
Yeah, it's gonna be great.
We're losing a lot of, you see how many like stories of like small town radio stations that are going under, and like, like it's sad. Like, it is actually quite sad that we are getting to that point. But my question to you is, why do you still love it? Like, you've done it for so many years, and like, you've met a lot of people along the way, and I'm fortunate to have met a lot of people in speaking that unfortunately don't like what they do.
Yeah.
And like still have to just like do it. And a lot of people, we joked earlier about like, a lot of us don't know actually what we're doing, but we just, like, I think authenticity and relatability goes a long way in that. And so is it the people? Is it the sports? Like, why do you still love it?
It's a great question. Mostly, I think, going back to the day-to-day, I've never gone into work a single day, guys, and been like, I don't feel like going into work today. Like, I've never been driving, taking that drive up the 400 or 401 or wherever I drive, and been like, I'm I don't feel like doing this today. And not a
Yeah.
single time have I felt that. And it all goes back to, however, had I gone into pharmacy and gone to that drugstore at this, and now at the age of 51, I'm pretty sure I would be struggling with the day-to-day a little bit because it wasn't something I truly wanted to do. So I think it all goes back to that at the end of the day. If you're lucky enough that you decide at a young age to do something you really want to do, and you're lucky enough to actually get to do that, then I think you have to try to maintain to be grateful. And it's not that hard for me to do, like I said, because I go into work every day with people who all wanted to work in television. They're all still thrilled to still be working in television. That's another thing, right, Tyler? Like the mass layoffs in my industry over the last
Yeah.
decade obviously make you grateful to still be sticking around and just doing something that you love each and every day, because a lot of the people that I started with, at the end of the day, you still have to pay the mortgage, right? And so they've gone into other things, and those things have gone well for the most part, but it's not what they dreamed of doing, right? Like they said on Family Guy, real estate, never anyone's first choice, like that's
Yeah.
right. Like
That's
it's like,
funny.
yeah, you can
Yeah.
do it, you can be successful, but that's not your passion, right? So if you're lucky enough to still be working in something that you consider your passion, then you better enjoy it. You better be present, right? Because there's so many people who'd kill to be in the position that you're in. I don't have to fake it. I really don't. I'm super lucky. Luke Wilson started working with me a couple of years ago, and it was just wild to see someone so naturally talented in front of the camera who had never trained for it. And he really invigorated me in the sense that he just comes in and he just loves the sport and he's passionate. And going back to what we were originally talking about, he's like his authentic self. Like what you see with Luke on TV, and whether you love it or hate it, that's him, and
Yeah.
people respond to that. And I respond to that. And it makes me want to elevate that. One of my favorite things to do now on our show that it's way more interview driven is I want to set everybody else up for success. I want to set up Darren Drager, and if he breaks a trade, I want to really pump it up, and I want to talk about it on the show, and I want people to know that our guys are still doing great work. I consider that a big part of what I do now is sort of setting everybody else up for success. So it gives me a lot of joy to do that. I want
You're a glue guy.
try to be I try to be. I
You're a
don't
glue
think I
guy.
always I think in my old age, I'm transitioning into glue guy status, and I'll definitely take it.
If you can get to a place where you're genuinely excited for someone else's opportunity or success or something they're passionate about, like you'll feedback loop where everything's great,
Yeah.
curiosity I think it's an infectious thing. And when you're genuinely happy for someone it's such a great way to live your life, otherwise you're jaded and you're pissed off at other people's success, which is a race to the bottom.
And Dylan, like in our business, that happens a lot, as you can imagine, because even before the industry started to struggle 10 years ago or whatever, there was even more competition for smaller jobs, right? And because there was less, podcasts and things that guys could do, there was a lot of that existed. And it's hard to pull yourself away from it, right? Because you're passionate about something and someone else got that gig, and it's it's like acting probably in a lot of ways too, right? It's a struggle to get to that point where you have joy and you're happy for people. But I think it comes with being happy with yourself, right? At the end of the day, you got to be happy with where you are in life, and you got to be happy with your lot in life. And you also, I think, if you're doing something that you're passionate about, but maybe it's not the gig that you exactly want, there's something to be said about just going all in on that gig that you have. And people will notice down the road, right? People will notice that. But if you're jaded and if you're bitter and if you start talking, people will notice that too. And that is infectious in the opposite way. And I've seen that so much in my business. Really, really talented broadcasters who just couldn't get over that, right? Couldn't get over missing out on this gig that they thought they deserved. And instead of sliding into something else that might end up being perfect for them, they just sort of shut down. And it's really unfortunate to see, right? And everybody's different, of course, and every business is competitive. Like Tyler, you were saying, the LA thing, I don't reflect on stuff like that. I just try to think of everything as even going back, I'll take it back even further. When I used to tell people that, you had to move to the Yorktons, Medicine Hats of the world to start that first job, I always said, but don't treat it like all right, I got to move to Yorkton. I got to,
Yeah.
treat it like, hey, this is the beginning of your journey, right? And this first step could be the most fun. And if you go to Yorkton and you're the CTV Yorkton weather guy or whatever, but you go into Yorkton with a great attitude, you join you join the beer league team, right? You go to the local bar, you show up, you show your face. You guys know as well as I do. People in Yorkton will be like, that dude's cool. Like, he's all right. And we'll make sure he has a good time here, right? And so you'll suddenly I've got all these friends from my 1 year in Saskatoon, 25 years later, still great friends from that year. And it was 1 year. But it was because I
Yeah.
went in, I was like, I love Saskatoon. I was meeting everybody. I was at the pad every night. It was just a blast. But I went in with the right attitude. I didn't go in like, I'm Toronto guy. This is beneath me. Like that's the worst thing you can possibly do. You got to treat every step like it's a part of the journey, and it'll be way more fun if you approach it that way.
I think it's an important part of so many stories where it's the war story of how you started. You had to pack your bags up and move to this place where you didn't know anyone. But I think a real key detail is that it's what you wanted to do. Like the grind is part of the journey, and if you look at it through that perspective, through that lens of, yeah, but it was awesome. Like when I moved to Vancouver, I knew one person. It was a guy on my team's dad who was a location manager, and I lived in the basement. So Ran Harper, I lived in his basement. I knew literally no one in Vancouver, and I worked as a production assistant, sweeping cigarette butts and emptying garbage cans. But it was the best job I ever had because I got to chat with actors. You could paint that with a brush of, it was a grind, it sucked, it was hard, it was cold, it was all those things, but it was also the best thing in the world because it was a step closer to what I wanted to be doing. And I think it's an important detail that if left out can make these difficult to attain jobs or jobs of which there are few seem a lot harder, to get to. But when you love what you're doing, it makes it a lot simpler.
You summed it up perfectly right there. And people probably noticed that you were enjoying yourself, right? And actors notice that you are asking them questions. People notice that kind of stuff, and it'll absolutely help you down the road. I truly, truly believe that. A lot of it is just attitude. When I got that Saskatoon gig, guys, my buddies from college still make fun of me. They're like, you leapt across the room like you won $10 million. They're like, you leapt over the couch. You were because I just knew, right? Like, I knew
Yeah.
how good the gig was. I knew how great the town was. And I was like, I'm so lucky. I literally felt like I skipped a step, right? I thought it would be like Yorkton, Saskatoon, Prince Albert, Saskatoon. So I was like, this is unbelievable to me. And then one thing people say to me all the time, and you guys will love this, is, like now that I've got kids and I'm picking up kids at school, and I'll talk to the other parents, they'll be like, what do you do? I'm like, I work nights, and I I always say I work nights.
Work nights.
And they're like, oh, that must be so tough. And I'm like, no, it's great because I love what I do. And I always remember I volunteered when I was going to U of A, the pharmacy, and I wasn't sure what I was like, I don't know if I want to do this. I volunteered at Global Edmonton for a while, and that's where I met Dutchie for the first time, actually.
Yeah.
The first day I was there, I met a camera operator. He just came up to me. He was just this old studio cam guy, just a veteran of the industry. And he's like, he was asking me what I wanted to do. And he said, you only need to know one thing in this industry. He said, you'll always be working when everyone else is off. And I was like, oh,
Yeah.
that's interesting. And he wasn't telling me that to discourage me. And I didn't take it that way at all. In fact, that has helped me so much over the years because it puts it in perspective, sort of. You're working nights, you're working weekends, you're away from your family. That's this business. That's the trade-off for doing something you're passionate about, right? Dylan, you're on a set, you're away from your wife, nobody wants to be in those situations. You'd rather have everything come to you, right? But to
Yeah.
do this, you gotta make those sacrifices. So hearing that from him, someone who, this old guy had been in the business forever, right? Hearing that at an early age, literally like day one, was so good for me because it really put it in perspective. Like, okay, you're a nights guy now. And I love nights, so I embrace it, right? Little things like that over the years have been so helpful for me. I guess that was my first bromance. That old dude at the at Globe.
That was it.
What a Landy.
Yeah.
Nailed it.
Even to pick up the rural Alberta talk. Like, I think people always say, like, what's your favorite crowd to speak to? And I'm like, I always say, like, rural Canada, because it's fascinating the perspective you gain from, showing up to Unity, Saskatchewan or Manning, Alberta, when they're just like grateful that you came and like you showed up and like you're coming to share your story or you're coming to act in their location or you're coming to do whatever. And I think that's something that this is not a knock on big city people. I live in Calgary now. Like, I get it. But like, I think one thing that I've gained on like the connection and the perspective of connection, of just like, connection thrives when people show up for each other, and like to see how excited they are to show you like Manning, the theater in Manning, Alberta, that's been there since like 1950 or whatever it is. And just like, you can see that just like that simple show up factor is truly, goes such a long way. And I think that is a testament to like, your tenure in the industries of like, you showed up for people and like consistently. And I think you've seen a lot of sporting events. So two-part question, give us some of your most memorable days, and then also just like your memorable like bromances that you've been able to witness.
Well, they kind of can tie in together because all the Olympics we got to cover are really up
Yeah.
there for us, because we're studio guys, Dan and I. So Dan's, my ultimate bromance for sure. And we were studio guys. We didn't get to go, people are always like, what? You get to cover all these things. We're like, we're in Scarborough all the time. Like, Scarborough,
Yeah.
dude. We're just there
Yeah.
all the time. We're at the food court at the Scarborough Town Center. Like, that's us. So the Olympic thing kind of happened by accident, but once it started to take off for us, it was such a special thing, and it's still such a special sporting event, because it's corny, it's cliche, but at the end of the day, it still feels like a level playing field. It still feels like that last sort of pure innocent sport, even though I know it's not, but it just feels that way. And when you're there, it's just a really unique environment and a special environment. And so, just for example, probably one of the worst broadcasting experiences we had was 2014 in Sochi. It was so crazy. We were working for Fox. We didn't even have Olympic rights. Like, we came up with a television segment called This Day in Olympic Still Photography, because we could only show still photography. That's how desperate we were. But the group we went with, Peter Schrager, who now works for ESPN, Dan, myself, Robert Lucetich, who works for the Golf Channel, we're like, we still to this day are on this group chat, and it all stems from the Sochi 2014 Olympic Games, where we were just like eating McDonald's and drinking so much vodka and just like trying to grind through it and hope a stray dog didn't bite us. So yeah, even in the worst moments, bromances can still occur. But I think probably number one for me, and this might sound like a really strange one, but is 2010 in Vancouver. It was an amazing experience for me. But my bromance was with the late Beverly Thompson, who was my co-anchor on the show. She was an amazing person. She recently passed away. She was such an amazing broadcaster. But what was so unique about her is when I showed up, they kind of stuck me on that show at the last minute. She had already been hosting the morning show forever. So just imagine from her perspective, right? She's older than me. I'm coming in. I'm a sportscaster. Like, I'm just like loud and brash. And like, I'm going to take this over. And I did. And at first she sort of was like, I don't know, but she got what I was going for right away. She saw I wasn't trying to make the product worse. I was trying to make it better. And she taught me more than I ever taught her. She taught me so much about interviewing. And she realized that I was listening to her and taking her advice. And we ended up getting along better than almost anyone I've ever worked with. And it's a great example of don't judge a book by its cover, right? Or don't necessarily think that because this person is not your age, not your gender, that you might not end up having the most amazing experience with this person and end up being friends for life. And that's exactly what we were. So, going back to the bromance theme, the thing about my business that's so unique is if you're open to those types of experiences, you're going to end up working with so many different people and forming so many cool friendships along the way, if you're open to it. If you're closed off, you're not going to get to that. So I think that's really what it's all about, remaining open, listening to people and trying to see other perspectives. That certainly worked for me in 2010. It even worked in 2014 when we were fearing for our lives in rural Russia.
Rural Russia, drinking cheap vodka and McDonald's.
Oh,
I hope that group chat is just still photographs.
it's incredible.
Oh
It should
man.
be.
Yeah.
It should be. It
just-
really should be. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, that is so good. Yeah, it makes sense. Like, I think it's just, and like, you could probably come on my speaking tour because I always say, like, you can connect with people in this life that you never thought you would be able to connect with, but you have to be open to it. And I think that's something that is probably fascinating about like reflecting on the journey that you've had and like how many people you've been able to connect with that originally you're probably like, well, I don't know, we like maybe they don't like hockey as much as me. Like, I don't know if we're gonna be able to connect as much. And then it just like it happens, and it's like actually super like refreshing sometimes, like what you end up gaining from it, just because of the simple fact of like you stepped into it rather than stepping back a little bit. So
I do speaking gigs too, and I totally relate to what you're saying, Tyler, about going back, we did that craft celebration tour. So we took the show on the road in like 2012, 2013. And it was so funny. Like the people who went east, so, 2 shows. So a bus would go east and do shows east, and a bus would go west and do shows west. The people who went east, predictably, the Maritime, the Atlantic Canadian stops were the most popular because the Atlantic Canadians were just like, we're going to get you guys all drunk and you're going to have
the best.
And then predictably, the Western stops, the Saskatchewan stops, because again, you'd be in like Kyle, Saskatchewan,
Yep.
and you'd be like, I've never been here before, but there are you'd just be sitting at a table and people just be dropping beers at the table constantly. Like just, like dropping full beers. Like you're not drinking fast enough. You're not drinking fast enough. And that's how they show love on the prairies, as you guys know.
Yeah.
That's how they
Uh-huh.
show love. Like they want to get you drunk because they feel like if you're not drunk, you're probably not having as much fun as you should have. So, so
Here's an old Milwaukee in a bush. For you.
exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. But I love that, about our country. It's like that's how we express our feelings toward each other, in a way. And yeah, those are memorable moments for sure. Like really, really awesome experiences for sure.
That's fantastic. Yeah, I love being Canadian. We're friendly
Yes,
people.
we
and we can
are.
put
We're
'em
the
back.
best. We rule.
I got one last one because you interview a ton of people, and I want you to talk about yourself for this last one. What works for Jay Onrait? And now that you're a dad, like what have you learned over the last couple of years that, if there's somebody on the other line or no listening to this right now, and it's been a hard couple of years for a lot of people, and I know that you're passionate, about connection and about the space a little bit of whether it's bromances and mental health. What has worked for you that leads to that advice that you can, give out to people regarding, support and like utilizing your people or, leaning on yourself, whatever that looks like.
I think it's a great question. And, going back to, like you said, it's been a tough 5 years for everybody. And for me, it just comes back to empathy. It might sound corny, but I just feel there's a lack of empathy in the world right now for other people and other people's experiences and what other people might be going through. And I feel like I have grown a lot in that department in the last 5 years, trying to see other people's perspective a bit more. I feel like we're so entrenched in our own little corners right now. Compromise is the only way that any shit gets done in any aspect of the world. So I would like us to talk to each other more, and I would like us to be, like I said, a little bit more empathetic to other people's experiences. I always felt like growing up in Alberta, and then moving to Eastern Canada, felt like I had a better perspective of everybody's mindset. Like I always hated when someone who grew up in Toronto that I knew, said about Albertans when they'd never been to Alberta or even talked to
Yeah.
an Albertan ever. It's just
Yeah.
like they're just like, here's what Danielle Smith said, so this is what I think you all think. And it's like, come on, like that's so annoying and frustrating, right? Because you guys know it's like a massive province with massive amounts of people and different perspectives, and that's how it should be. That's how our country should be. It's supposed to be. You're supposed to have, be able to think freely and stuff. So I just think empathy. That's what I always come back to now, is just having more empathy for others. I'm trying to do that, and hopefully others will do that too. And maybe we can compromise a little bit more and move forward a little bit more.
Love it. Jerry, we cannot thank you enough for taking the time, brother. This has been a blast, and I could shoot the shit with you for hours because you're professional.
Thanks.
You can make us look good for a long time. So thanks for giving us the hour, man. We really, really appreciate it.
Guys, it was awesome. I loved it. It was a great chat. Love what you guys are doing. So thanks for having me. I'll come back anytime.
Hey, Jay, I got one last question for you after, though.
You're
but
like
thanks for
Columbo, Tyler.
Thanks for coming. Thanks for coming. Appreciate you. Dylan, I'm full of questions today, and I got another one for you. So, we are lucky to have many, many pieces of lovely jewelry from Charm now. Okay, so down the road, things get dirty, you know? Can I go into Charm? You know I can always go see our girl Morgan at Market Mall, location in Calgary, to, check things out, but I guess I could just ask you, what can Charm do for us?
I'm glad you asked because, as I've said before, although I don't work here, I happen to know quite a bit about Charm. One of the very, very special policies that they have is free lifetime cleaning. So, whatever you buy from Charm, wherever you are in the country of Canada, which happens to be where Charm is from, a Canadian-owned and operated company, you can go into a store with your jewelry and they will clean it for you for the low, low price of absolutely free. Why, you ask? Well, it's because you bought your jewelry from Charm and now you're part of the Charm family, and the Charm family treats their family very well. Charm is a proud sponsor of our podcast, Bromance. Thanks for asking, Ty.
Thanks for answering, Bill.